there, I just want to share another little thought with you that hopefully will bring some encouragement to us at this time. So I don't know about you, but one of the things that I'm not really enjoying at the moment are the essential and occasional trips to the supermarket I've had to make. I think it's only been maybe 3 trips since lockdown started, but each time it's been accompanied by kind of a little bit of apprehension and some really careful planning about timings and working out when the window of opportunity will be where there'll be the least amount of people queuing outside and the least amount of people inside to make it safe. And thinking about this reminded me of another time in my life when I didn't particularly enjoy going to the supermarket, and that's when the children were little, and maybe you'll be able to relate to that. So when Rachel and Joel were both little, I tried everything I could not to take them both at the same time, and I would try and leave them with Matt or one of the grandparents. But when I just had Rachel, I did used to take her. And I thought about a story that happened a long time ago when she was very little, and I just wanted to share it with you. But before I do, I just want to ask you a favour and ask you, please don't judge me. Do you promise? Okay. So this is what happened. So when Rachel, like I say, she was about 10 months old, I was at home during the week. Matt was actually on a training course that day, so he was quite a few miles away. And I needed to go to the supermarket, so I thought, well, I'll take Rachel. I phoned Mum up, and on the off chance that she would also be available, and she was. And so together I picked her up and we went to Sainsbury's. And I'd thought carefully about timings and the whole window of opportunity when Rachel wouldn't be too hungry or too tired. And as a result, it was actually quite a successful trip. We did it as a kind of tag team mission. So I took the pushchair, Mum took the trolley. We made our way round the aisles and made it out in pretty good time. Overall, pretty successful. And then we made our way back to the car and ready for the journey home. So by this time, Rachel was now beginning to get a little bit more restless in the car. She'd gone from the car seat to the pushchair, back into the car seat, and she was really ready to get out and get home. So I dropped Mum off, and then I drove the little distance it takes to get to my house. And I thought what I would do is I'd park the car, I'd take the shopping in first, leave Rachel in the car just for a moment, and then I'd go back for her so I didn't have to leave her in the house on her own or try and juggle holding Rachel and the bags. So that's what I did. I unlocked the boot, took the bags out, and now by this time Rachel was beginning to cry a little bit. You know, she really wanted to get out, and so I thought I'll just give her something to hold to distract her. So I opened the door and gave her the nearest thing to me, which were my car keys, and said, here you go Rachel, you can jangle those, thinking that they'd make a nice noise and that would kind of take her attention for a bit, which it did. So then I closed the door and got the bags and started to walk to the house. You can probably see where this story is going. And just as I did, I heard a click, the flash of the car lights, and I turned around and realised to my horror that I'd of course given Rachel the car keys, and on the car keys there was a button that activated the central locking to the car. And Rachel has pressed that button, so she was now in the car, the doors were locked, and I was on the outside, and there was nothing I could do to get back in. So I remember looking through the window and saying, Rachel, the keys, press the keys. Of course, she wasn't going to understand that because she's a 10-month-old baby. And so I did the next thing that I could think of, and I phoned Mum and said, Mum, I've locked Rachel in the car. And she came round with a friend, Louise, who happened to have called in to see Mum. And after a little while of realising that there was nothing that we could do to get Rachel out, to cut a long story short, we called the AA, and the AA came and got Rachel out for us. Now you might be thinking, Mandy, why are you telling me this story about the time you were an awful mother and locked your child in the car? Well, I just want to take you back to that image for a moment of Rachel in the car. She's on the inside, she's locked in, feeling constrained, and I'm on the outside looking in, saying, come on, press the keys. And the thing is that at the moment, we can feel, it's possible to feel this kind of sense of confinement or restriction. Now we are in a physical sense in a way, in that we've been told that we need to not leave the house unless it's for an essential reason. But most likely, it's what affects us most are the confinement and the constraint and the kind of the feeling of a lack of freedom that's actually brought on by our feelings and our emotions and our thinking. So feelings of doubt, of anxiety, of fear, or maybe uncertainty, or kind of a sense of negativity can sometimes kind of leave us feeling restricted, and almost like we become a bit of a prisoner to them and we can't see a way out. And in my story, we had me on the outside, a rather imperfect parent looking in, sort of panicking, saying, "Press the key, Rachel, press the key." But do you know what? In our lives, if we're like that child that sometimes feels constrained and restricted by our own feelings and emotions and our thinking, we actually have an incredibly perfect Heavenly Father who sees us and sees us in our needs, and he looks in on us and he's saying to us, "Look, child, I've given you the keys." Now, God has given us many good gifts, many, many good gifts. But today I just want to remind you of one of the gifts that he's given us, which are his promises. And in his promises to us, we find hope. And with those promises that he's given us, I want to say it's like a key to unlocking any kind of oppression, any kind of restriction that we might feel. And actually those keys that he's given us, the promises that he's given us in his word, that always come to pass, that are always true, that never fail, those promises actually are a way to receiving freedom again in our lives and taking off that restriction. And the thing is that all we need to do is, it's no use like Rachel was in the car and she was holding those keys and she was jangling them. But, in order for them to be effective, we need to activate those promises. And what do I mean by activating God's promises? Well, I guess I mean not just reading them as words, but seeing them as truth and believing them and living by them and applying them to our lives. Because if we do that, then that is a gateway to feeling a sense of God's freedom and taking off the oppression and the restriction that sometimes our feelings and thoughts can give us. Now, there are many, many promises in the Bible. There are many words that God has spoken over us about his goodness and what he wants to provide for us as his children. And I won't go through them, obviously, all now, but you can look them up for yourself. You might know where to find them straight away. If not, I'm a big fan of Google. If you type in God's promises in Google, it will come up with a whole lot for you. But just to start us off, just thinking about God's promises and how they can really lead us to a sense of freedom in our lives, I just want to remind us of some of the promises that Jesus gave us when he walked this earth. And so I won't give you all the Bible references now, but I'll put them in the comments below, and you can, perhaps if you want to, you can spend some time reading them. But Jesus, he spoke many words of reassurance and he gave us many promises, and they're like keys that we can hold on to, that we can activate to access freedom in our lives. So for example, a good place to start, Jesus said, if the Son sets you free, if I set you free, then you are completely free. You are free indeed. And maybe that's fear and anxiety now, but actually looking back, over past experiences, Jesus wants to set us free from many things that can hold us captive. Perhaps it's bitterness or unforgiveness. Maybe it's past hurts or disappointments. Well, Jesus promises freedom. He also promised us light in the darkness. He says, those who walk with me will never walk in darkness. He promises us the full life. He says, that he's come to give us life in all its fullness. He's promised us fruitfulness. Maybe at the moment you feel like, what's the point? We feel a bit useless, or we struggle with a sense of self-worth. But Jesus said, he said that if you remain in me, you will be fruitful. You will have a role to play. Also, his peace, who doesn't need that at the moment? He said, I give you my peace, and it's not like the world's peace. So don't be troubled and don't be afraid. He's promised to respond to us. He said, ask, it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. So when we call to him, when we speak to him, we know that he's promised to respond to our cries. And then, of course, there's the promise of salvation that comes about through his amazing love when he says, that God loved the world so much that he gave his only son. So God has given us many promises, and they are keys for us to unlock perhaps some of the chains and some of the restrictions that we're feeling in the moment, brought about by our own perhaps fears or our doubts or our uncertainties. So I just want to encourage you today, look in your hand, see the promises that God has given us, as a gift to us and just activate them in our lives to help us receive a sense of freedom.